You joined us for Rain of Blood, and together we made it rain bigger and better than we could have ever imagined. So now, join us for a second blazing inferno of knowledge and exploration. You're listening to Rain of Fire, the scorching sequel event to Rain of Blood, where we're going to delve into the world of fire play education and safety as we prepare for the upcoming Rain of Fire event. Join your host, Miss Kitten, Radically Dark, and Ember Solaris as we ignite your curiosity and stoke the flames of passion with discussions, interviews, and authentic insights from around the globe. Together, we're three flames united in one mission to make quality kink education more accessible and open pathways to conversation and connection about edgeplay topics around the world. But before we dive into these sizzling topics, a content warning. Rain of Fire discusses mature themes, explicit content, and practices related to BDSM and fire play. So listener discretion is advised, and this is an adult-only podcast. Other topics may include mental health, trauma, consent, and more. So please be sure you're in a good spot to engage in these topics before continuing to listen. So, grab your fire gear, stoke the flames of curiosity, and let's embark on this crackling journey together. Welcome to Rain of Fire.
Hey, amazing fire starters. Welcome to my dungeon. We are starting our Rain of Fire podcast. I'm so excited to have you guys all with us. And I have Alessi here today who is going to present for us. We're very excited to have them as a presenter and to have them in my dungeon virtually because we're a couple of 1,000 kilometers away. But it's lovely to connect with you, Alessi, and welcome to this podcast. And welcome to Rain of Fire.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
Yeah, we're super excited. The topic is something that being in Africa, we deal with a lot of fire. We probably gonna scare the living pants off everybody because I'm not sure we even know what a safety standard is in Africa. I think you can still buy dynamite at our local hardware store for fishing. So I think it's been really interesting to hear everybody's take on it, and I think we're all super keen to hear the classes. So you are going to do some really interesting classes. Maybe you can tell our audience a little bit before we talk about those, just a little bit how you got into BDSM and how you started burning things. I think those are probably the way to start.
Awesome. So I entered the DFW kink community in 2022, but I was in the online kink spaces and in a couple of other local spaces throughout the years for probably about the last 7 years. But the DFW kink community is where I actually got a footing for my BDSM journey. And so I started going out to one of the local dungeons here in the Dallas area called Infliction Hall, and started volunteering and learning and going to classes, and then eventually switched to also teaching some of those classes and doing tastings for different events in the Metroplex and things like that. And so I've been very blessed to have a lot of really great supportive people that not only trust me to play with them, but also to educate them. Fire is something I actually got into very quickly. But I got into it because I am a switch. I got into it as a bottom. I watched someone at the dungeon pretty early on in me going there do fire flushing. And the second that he lit up the fire torches, I was like, I want that. That is everything that I have ever wanted. And so I wanted to learn how to do fire flushing, and I wanted to experience it. And so I started switching for fire. My fire kit is one of the first kits that I put together as a dom and as a top, which I know is a little backwards. I did do the traditional like impact before fire, but fire was a very close second. And so I started doing fire flushing. I do use a fire glove. I I personally also consider the way that I do wax to be adjacent to fire. I know that some people consider it pure sensation, but started doing that quite a bit, and drumming, and really, really enjoying fire. And I was very lucky at the time that my submissive also was a huge fire bug. And so we got to explore a lot of really cool things together.
Wow, so you just mentioned like my brain is a bit on fire. You mentioned like a whole lot of stuff that I have never seen in real life. I've never had the privilege of experiencing. So I'm going to ask you to just backtrack a little bit. You got into fire fleshing. What is fire fleshing? What is the experience? What does it include? Talk to me about that.
Yeah,
please.
Absolutely. So fire fleshing is when you have two torches, and the torches can look different and be made out of different materials depending on the top that is using them. But you basically have two torches, and one is going to be soaked in alcohol and one is going to be lit on fire, also with alcohol. And what the top will do is draw a line with the alcohol across the body and then tap the other torch that is actively on fire on that line. And then that fire is going to run across the alcohol line over the skin, and then is going to be put out with usually the top's hand.
Oh wow! Okay, so we've done the full experience of flash cotton, being our whole fire experience in Africa, and we have managed to set the dungeon alight a couple of times with needle play and wax and stuff like that. So we really don't have a good history, but we practiced at home. We just took a little bit of alcohol and we put it firstly on a metal box, and then we lit it, and then we put a little bit on our hands and we lit it. And both my bottom and myself, it's super hot. Like it's quite an experience, and it eventually gets hot enough to burn you. So I mean, there's definitely risk involved in it. And can you describe the sensation a little bit and what it feels like to experience that? I'm from burning my hand, and I probably wasn't doing it very scientifically, but it's quite an adrenaline rush. And it was quite the experience, and it was probably a tiny drop of alcohol on my hand. There wasn't much. So so maybe can you give me some feedback there?
Absolutely. And so with fire fleshing, there's actually a sensation experience for both the top and the bottom. For the bottom, fire fleshing can be leveled in the way that it can cause a little bit more of that burning sensation or a little bit less. It shouldn't ever really fully burn. So when I say burn, I mean it gets very warm. And that depends on how long you leave the fire on the skin and how much alcohol that you put there, as well as the proof of what alcohol, whether you use a 70 or a 90% or a mixture of the both. The sensation that the bottom is feeling typically is that warm line. And so sometimes I will draw patterns or in the alcohol, or I will draw shapes or words or letters. I like to do this really fun game where I will draw in the alcohol and the fire a letter on the bottom's back, and the bottom will have to guess the letter. And if it's negotiated beforehand and the bottom likes impact, they may also get hit with something that they consented to if they did not get the letter correct. And so the bottom is able to feel the trail of what that fire is doing on their back, but it should feel this very warm, sensual feeling. I've had people with fire fleshing. Some of them are like, oh my gosh, that was so relaxing. I could have just like fallen asleep peacefully, because it was just such a relaxing experience. I have others who are more masochists and ask for a bit more pain, that are, keeping them on their toes by the way that I'm moving the fire. Maybe I'm moving to different areas of the body instead of just keeping it very like slow and sensual. And then there's others who think that they're very much into fire and have never done it before. And then the second it gets on their skin, they get a little scared, which is completely natural. So for some people, it can be also a form of fear play. So as with anything in kink, what the sensation the bottom is feeling is very much a manufactured experience based on what the negotiations were beforehand and what the purpose of the scene is. As a top, the sensation is requires a lot of hand movements. But something that some people don't think through is you have to put out the fire. And the best way for fire flushing to put out that fire is with your hand as the top. And so if you are going to be doing fire flushing as a top, you have to be not even just fully prepared, you have to accept that you're going to be sticking your hand into fire and putting it out and smothering it with your hand. And sometimes that will also get pretty warm. If you're doing it correctly, you're also not going to burn yourself either. Nobody in the process should get burned if everything has gone according to plan. But there are those risks, and you have to accept that you are smothering it with fire. But it's going to have that warm sensation as well. I thoroughly enjoy it, but some people don't.
I love that. It's just when I come to Dallas and have you burn my bum, like I just like, is that bad? Like I'm getting with this call and Googling flights to Dallas. It sounds amazing. And you mentioned a couple of other things before I get to the wax, which is something that I am really, it's one of my passions. You mentioned drumming. Is something that you do with fire? How does fire and drumming connect?
So with those two torches, right, what we use for fire flushing, usually when you're doing fire flushing, both of those torches are actually in one hand for that top, right? Because you need to have the other hand to smother the fire. But when you do drumming, you're not actually lighting the skin on fire. You're not laying alcohol down. Both of the torches are going to be lit afire, and then you're just tapping. This is why I call it drumming, but you're tapping the skin usually with both torches, and you can do some sort of rhythm. You can do absolutely random. I like to call myself a chaos dom. And so I like to do completely random things. But you're drumming across the skin with both torches lit on fire, not drawing those lines.
Oh, awesome! My bottom has entered my CPT slave has entered the room, and I can feel his fear through this app, because he knows that this is in his future. So and I could just feel his response to your chaos dom thing, because I think I'm like the gremlin of chaos, and I absolutely love the idea about having two lit weapons to tap I'd love to do feet, like the soles of the feet for me, and then bastonado afterwards would be like a dream come true. So yeah. I hope he's gonna go home and spend the rest of his afternoon at work fearing coming home tonight. But that sounds absolutely amazing. There's obviously prep that needs to go into this. Obviously prep for the skin, and is there something that you don't suggest people use? How would you prepare your bottom? Let's just say, for instance, I was gonna set my bottom on fire tonight. What would I be advising him to do?
So one of the really big key things is that I always recommend that people take a shower, but not because I'm scared of people not taking a shower, but we want to make sure that there's no chemicals on the skin. So bottoms can't use lotion or any sort of scented things or perfume. I want to make sure that a bottom doesn't have like body glitter on, anything that could melt to the skin, or anything that could spark a unintentional fire or an unintentional burn because of the chemicals inside of it. And so when I do fire at the dungeon, usually it becomes a big scene, right? And people will come up to me afterwards and they're like, oh my gosh, can you do that to me? And I will not do fire the same night with a pickup play person that I do not trust, that can look me in the eye and tell me that they have done all of these things or have not put on any of these things. Because it does require to be really intentional with your skin. Because if you put on perfume before going to the dungeon and I light you on fire, that's going to cause a problem.
The sadist in me is smiling. We did a bit of research this weekend about what burns, and anything with butane in it will obviously burn, and then anything with alcohol in it. And the products that contain butane that you are unaware of, things like dry hair shampoo, hair mousse, all of that stuff, like stuff that I never really thought about, shaving cream. So I think there's definitely like bigger considerations. I'm a needle top, so it's really important people shower before they come and see me. Yeah. I'm super like, and for me it is, because I just don't trust that they've showered. So for me, I'm super neurotic. Like that is like also, that the whole prep of the skin for me is super important, because for me it's my canvas, and I think that translates to, I want the canvas to be as beautiful as it can be for as long as possible, because I would like to do a couple of art pieces. It's not just a once off. I'm not a big pick up play person, so that care, and I so relate to what you said about being able to trust that ethical point of do you trust the person to tell you that they are just giving you lip service and telling you they've done all the things so that you do the fire play and like, something can go wrong, or do you really trust the person to have a good self-care routine? And I think that self-care routine translates then to aftercare, because people who look after themselves well know what they need for aftercare and are able to ask for it, because it's a practice in their life. So I liked hearing you bring all of that in. You mentioned wax play, and this is like, it's such a bone of contention. Like, is wax play fire play? Is it not fire play? So when we do it at home, we like the big pause, and we're heating it up in water bath. But that temperature, that it's still a temperature. There's still a huge risk of burn. You're still worried about the skin prep and stuff. There are other reasons why I wouldn't have stuff on the skin. But tell me about your wax play, and I'm interested to hear how you connected with fire play.
Yeah, absolutely. So wax play for me kind of falls into two categories. I think that wax play could be considered more of a sensation. And then I think that there's ways that I do wax play that definitely have to fall into the fire arena for me. When I'm doing, so wax is one of the first things that I started teaching in the DFW community. And it's also one of the things that I've done a lot of tastings for at different events and stuff like that. And when I'm doing it with someone that I don't know, because I'm giving them an experience or I'm teaching them an experience, it can be that very, hold the flame really high above, figure out where they like the sensation. It's a sensual experience, and I love that part of wax. But when I play with my partners, when it comes to wax, one of the things that I used to do with someone who is still a play partner, but no longer my submissive, because they found their own sadist inside of them, and I love them for it. But one of the things that we used to do is I would turn them into an altar. And I would take the candles, and the flames would be very close to their skin, because they are a pretty heavy masochist. We delighted in causing and enjoying pain with each other. And so I would do some things with them that were in our risk profile that I wouldn't do at a regular wax tasting. I would attach different objects. And so we also did a lot of blasphemy play. So I would attach rosaries to their skin with using the wax as a glue, or different flowers. I made rivers out of blue wax and then put river rocks on different parts of their skin. And whenever we would put the flames closer to their skin as a form of, you couldn't really consider it fear play for them because it didn't spark that sort of emotion. For us, it was more of just this sensual sadomasochism, but it could be considered fear play for other people, of having that really close interaction with the fire coming from the candle instead of just feeling the sensations of the wax falling, and using the fire as a tool in the scene instead of just the main sensation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think I recently used wax over needles, and what I found super interesting about that is the skin is already incredibly heightened, and its response is incredibly heightened because of the piercings. So its reaction to the wax and the feeling of the wax is just, it's just super intense. It's not a bad intensity, but it's a concentrated intensity, and the skin's reaction is so much more. And even then, when you lower the flame towards the skin, because the skin is already pierced and is already reacting, you can the feeling of the flame being closer and the feeling of that heat, the intensity is just, it's quite an overwhelming experience. It's so I definitely think that wax is definitely edge play. Like I have a lot of people who tell me that it's not edge play. I've seen wax go wrong in the wrong hands, and I definitely think it is edge play. I definitely agree that wax is fire play on a lot of levels, and I think it has a similar risk profile to fire play. I think you need to have the good negotiations, and I think a lot of the time wax is like the start of kink, and people don't really realize how intense the experience is until they've done it a couple of times, and they've experienced it even with a big pour. When you're pouring 6 or 7 kilograms of wax onto somebody, that's an intense experience for the body and the body's reaction to it. So loved hearing you talk about that. Definitely filled with some new ideas. My poor slave, I can feel him shaking already. So you teach a really interesting class, and your class really got my attention when I looked at the list of classes that were offered for presenting about neurodiversity and disability in kink. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about that and how that came to be part of your repertoire and your interest in it?
Yes, absolutely. So I run at that same dungeon that I've been talking about. One night a month, we do an event called Chronically Kinky. And the purpose of Chronically Kinky is a night that is focused on neurodivergent, disability, and chronic illness, kink education, and camaraderie, for lack of a better word. And that is something that's close and dear to my heart because I am physically disabled. I'm also autistic, and I also have ADHD. And so, and not only do I have those things, but also both of my romantic partners, who are also both kink partners of mine, have those. And the majority of my repeated play partners also have something within those 3 buckets, if not something in all 3 of those buckets. And so really I was looking around the DFW community, and I was seeing that there was a lack of education about how to do kink safely on either side of the slash when you have disability, chronic illness, or neurodiversity in one of the partners or both of the partners. For me and myself, I have rheumatoid arthritis. So my rheumatoid arthritis is centered in my hands. And if everything that I've just said, right, about how important your hands are, that is a big deal. And of course, and like fire isn't even the only thing that I top for. I have about 6 or 7 kits for various things, and they all require a lot from my hands. And so the very first time that someone approaches me about play, and at the very beginning of every class that I teach, one of the first things that I say is, I have rheumatoid arthritis in my hands, because that is a really, really big, important part of the other person having informed consent to especially play from me. But it also affects a lot of the things that I do. With fire flushing, one of the people that I was learning fire flushing from, he uses these very large torches, and they work perfectly well for him. He's a great fire flushing top. I could not use those torches. First of all, my hands are just smaller, but also the way that my hands work, if I were to use larger torches, even if I could hold them, it would put more strain on my hands. And that is the opposite of what I want. So whenever I talk about in classes about neurodivergence and disability and chronic illness and how that interacts with kink, it really falls into a couple of categories. The first one, and always the really big, giant, glow up, flashing light sign that I hold up in my head whenever I have these conversations, it says informed consent. Informed consent is the key for every kink interaction, regardless if any of the parties have a neurodivergence or a disability. But when you do have disabilities or chronic illnesses, informed consent becomes a lot more key on both sides of the slash. And so we talk a lot about what informed consent is. What are the requirements? Sorry. What are the requirements of informed consent? But then we also talk about accommodation and adaptation. How can me as a top adapt and accommodate myself when I am topping? How can me as a bottom accommodate and adapt for bottoming? And how do I encourage other bottoms and other tops to do so as well? One of the things that we like to do is have different experience shares, because different disabilities are going to require different accommodations and different needs. But I can share, and I do share, the ones that I found for myself and the ones that we found for my partners, because it gives people a starting point. And oftentimes what we find is when people with disabilities or neurodivergence approach other people for play but are not educated in this area, we kind of have two things potentially go wrong. Either instead of saying, your disabilities are not in my risk profile because I don't have enough knowledge to do this with you safely and I don't want to harm you, because that is a completely valid and needed sentence. But a lot of times bottoms are said, well, like, you just can't do that, right? I can't suspend you, or I can't tie you, or I can't set you on fire, or I can't do needles with you. And a lot of the times they can. It's just that person may not have the knowledge base to do it. And the bottom might not have the knowledge base to do it either. And so that's part of having a successful negotiation, right? A successful negotiation can be both parties deciding that they are not in each other's risk profile. That's not a failure. That's a success. But we were finding a lot in our community that we weren't having those experiences. We were having tops just go, oh, well, you're just never going to be able to do it. And so that's one of the reasons why this education is important. But on the other hand, we also had experiences of both tops and bottoms going, oh, well, it's just not important to talk about. It's not important for me to tell my top or my bottom what is going on with my body or the potential risks that come from that. And that also, in the opposite extreme way, is really, really, really harmful, and doesn't allow for either side to fully informed consent to that situation, because there are risks that are actively not being discussed. And so that's a really key part of that informed consent part. And then finding also what are ways to accommodate either sides of the slashes, disabilities, or neurodivergence.
I love that. I'm autistic, so for me, negotiations are super important. It's super important that I understand that we align ethically to start, and that for me takes communication and takes clarification. And I think that I drive 90% of the world insane, because I probably need more to feel ethically aligned than somebody who's not neurodivergent. And in the beginning in kink, it was so difficult to find a way to express that wasn't insulting to other people, because it's not meant in any insulting way. You know, I need the information to have informed consent. And then the other thing for me was understanding my own capacity. And I think you've spoken about it in a different way, but understanding that I have capacity, physical and emotional, on the day, which you've spoken about in saying, this is my disability, this is what I can and I can't do, this is what I can and I can't cope with. But having that capacity check-in has really helped me not have my meltdowns and be a far more stable top, which is always great. I mean, every bottom wants a stable top. My slave's really grateful when I'm stable. But I just love hearing that you guys are speaking about this so openly. It's so necessary, and you know that ethical alignment. And you're speaking about the same thing. I'm just titling it in a different way, but that ethical alignment, understanding that you're not a bad person. We just don't align to make this a safe experience, and it doesn't make it a failed negotiation. And I think the binary of good or bad or pass or fail the whole time needs to be removed. So super excited for your class, and I think it's really relevant. And you brought what you're speaking about in your community situation and how you're finding it is an issue that was raised and something that needed to be dealt with. Is definitely something I'm feeling in my own community, and it's definitely not spoken about. And I think a lot of the time people give yeses instead of giving informed consent and embodied consent in a situation, because they don't want to be, they're afraid to hear the no, and they're no means that it's failed. I love what you said about it's not a failed negotiation. I really think that is something I'm taking away from this conversation, and I feel quite empowered from just listening to you talk about it. So I'm excited for your class, and I definitely think it's something that the more we can talk about and the more we can get people to engage in different ways of thinking about information in consent and risk management strategies, and how to put a play together that fills everybody's fantasy, but also make sure that everybody has capacity for it, whether it's a physical capacity or an emotional capacity or just a capacity on the day, I think is super important and often forgotten about.
Absolutely. We call it taking inventory. Before I teach, before I top, before I bottom, literally at any point, it's taking inventory and going, how are my hands? How is my body? How is my brain? How is my energy levels? Have I eaten today enough protein to be able to fulfill this? Have I hydrated enough? Did I get enough sleep? All of those things are super important questions, especially when you do have a neurodivergence or a disability or a chronic illness. And I am very, very upfront with all of my play partners, and all of my play partners will tell you I have moved scenes before because woken up and gone, you know what, hands are not going to do it today. And that's a big part of the trust that my play partners have in me, is they know that if my hands are not going to do it today, I am not going to take that risk for them. If I have any question in my mind, if I do that inventory and I have any question about, I don't know how this is going to go, we're not doing it. And they trust me to make that decision. But they only trust me to make that decision because A, they know me and they know my values. B, they've actively seen me do it. And C, I was open and honest with them from the very first. And that's a really big key part of having disabilities and neurodivergence and being a top or a switch or a bottom, and doing these things safely. It can be kind of awkward, right? When someone comes up and was like, "Oh my goodness, you're such a great top. I want you to do all of these things for me." And the first thing out of my mouth is like, "Well, I'm disabled." Right. And so like there's a little bit of uncomfortableness that has to be kind of worked through and gotten over, because these people who approach me for play, even if they don't have the kink knowledge to know how much trust they're giving me, because they don't understand how much edge play is the things that I do, like fire. Even them asking that question, I have a responsibility because I understand what trust they are naturally giving me. And so that's a lot about what we talk about in the informed consent arena when it comes to these types of conversations, is a recognition of trust and responsibility from both sides.
Oh, sorry. Just sorry about the cough. You spoke about taking inventory, and I really like that. We do a capacity check-in, and I definitely think I can improve the capacity check-in with an inventory list. So we do a capacity check-in out of 10 for emotional and for physical, and if we are not hitting 6.5 or 7, we don't play. And it's super hard in the beginning just to be honest about that, because I mean, I'm the type of girl who's always 10 out of 10. Like, I'm a 10, dude. Like, don't ask me stupid questions. So just being that self-awareness to be honest and say, I'm not a 10 today. Because my whole life in all my vanilla work, I have to be fine. It is fine. It's fine with my partner. It's fine with my boss. It's fine with my parents. It's fine with my friends. Not being fine is not okay in our community. It's something we're not allowed to be. We're not allowed to not be fine. And I think so giving it a number makes it easier than telling somebody you're not fine. But adding your inventory list, I'd really like to chat to you a little bit about that, because I think we can put add it to, I'll send you my negotiation card. Maybe we can add it to the negotiation card, and it just gives people some ideas of what to think of, because you've given me a huge amounts of ideas, even though I'm asking the questions just to the order that you put them in. It's really an empowering way to be able to be self-aware about your body, because in the beginning, when you say, well, what are your numbers? I mean, I'd just lie to myself. I'd be like, I'm a 9 today, 9.5, maybe a 10. And it's physically impossible to be a 10. Like, it's not possible. You would have to have the perfect amount of sleep, the perfect amount of food, the perfect amount of social good experiences, the perfect amount of wealth in your bank account, the perfect amount of great family support. And, just those things on an emotional level, if they're not all connecting, I mean, you're not a 10. And then to look at your physical side and say, well, did I really eat well today? Did I really sleep well? Did I really am I tired, hungry, angry, upset? All of those things affect your physical well-being and your ability to then perform a scene afterwards. And I think a lot of people come into the community and look at us as tops and have a huge expectation to enjoy the experience, but are not comprehending that part of the experience is the intimacy shared between the bottom and the top. And it is the truthfulness, the honest communication. I think as much as kink has brought me amazing frigging epic needle scenes and biochemistry and all of that, the empowerment from kink is that honest connection, that honest intimacy and communication that you can share between partners. So just really like kudos to hearing you say these things today. And I found this experience hugely empowering. And I might be slightly crushing on your American accent and also on the fact that you're so self-aware and that you are so willing to share this so openly. I love it. It's special and it needs to be commended.
Well, thank you. I am always crushing on your accent, so just know that is reciprocated. But it is definitely, especially as also autistic people, introspection is really hard for neurodivergents in general, and so there's also a way to hold space for one of my partners might say, "Hey, I really want to do X scene today," and then they're like, I 100% have the inventory to do that X scene. And then we find out they did not, in fact, have the inventory to do X scene. And so we might change plans. It might be mid-scene. It might be before the scene. And kind of holding space for introspection is super, super hard. It's not a perfect game. And that's kind of why I also do have those practical questions of if I am, because introspection's hard for me too. If I'm like, yeah, no, emotionally, we're perfect. We're so good. Brain is fantastic. Body, totally fine. And then I get to the question of, okay, have I eaten? And I'm like, I haven't eaten in the last 10 hours. I'm like, all right, start back at step 1. Okay, go eat food. And then try again with your inventory and see maybe where you are when you've connected the body for a hot second. And so like making sure that having like those practical questions has been super, super helpful to kind of gauge away from the just autistically thinking in my brain, we're not having a meltdown. So that means we are totally fine.
Hey, right? Is that a thing for you? That's a thing for me. So I have this ridiculous self-care wheel on my fridge, and next to it is a list of stuff that I have to. It's called my adult list. Like I have to be ticking the adult boxes before I can add anything else to my capacity for the day. And they're things like, have I tidied up? Have I managed the dishes? Am I finding that 4 dishes in the sink so fucking overwhelming that I'm not touching them? Or am I, and when I sort of look at my list and I say, oh, my capacity is an 8 or a 9 today, and then I realize that the 4 dishes in the sink have been haunting me for the last 4 hours, and instead of getting up and just going to do them, I have been fixated on the 4 dishes in the sink. I have to go back and I have to say, I wasn't super honest about my capacity. Maybe I'm not an 8, maybe I'm actually a 5.5, and I shouldn't be looking at kink as an outlet. I should be looking at that little self-care wheel and doing something that would be good for myself so that I can raise my capacity levels so that I'm ticking the adult list before I'm adding the kink list to the day's activity. And it's translated to my regular vanilla work as well, and it's made me better. Like I don't say yes immediately. Like I have to go home and think about it, and I'm very good at getting out of the client and making sure that I have to do a capacity check-in on myself, and I'm aware of what I can offer. And if my numbers are low, when they ask me a question, my answer is, I can't give you an answer right now. I'm going to get back to you on that in the next 24 hours instead of my normal, like, of course I can do it. I'm a 10. I'm good.
Yeah. Everything is fine.
Everything is fine. Meanwhile, like, I'm half a second away from that complete meltdown of I've now overextended myself on every level, and I don't see a way out, and it's just too much. Oh no, this is an amazing convo, and I'm really excited about Rain of Fire. I think the more that we can cross communities and communities can share knowledge from people's personal experience, I just think it's really beautiful. Coming from my community in Africa, where we are smaller and we were segregated by apartheid for so many years, so we're only now starting to be adults. It's just really really wonderful, and it's a privilege to speak to people like you and to have this opportunity. So really heartfelt thanks, and I've loved the time with you, and I'm so looking forward to your classes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for not only giving me an opportunity to speak in this conversation, but giving me an opportunity to present this thing that I care a whole lot about to a larger audience. I really appreciate it, and I'm very excited to do it.
Yay! And I'm going to drop your socials in the bio for this. So if there's anything else social wise you want to send me, I will drop it in this bio so people can get hold of you and connect with you if they have questions and they're in your area, or they want to look up other classes that you're offering. Because I really think that you deserve the support, and you I'm looking at plane tickets to Dallas. I might disappear. But yeah, so I'm going to drop all your socials. If there's any other way that people can reach out to you, what do you suggest?
The best way to reach out to me is through FetLife. My Fet name is CelestialSabre, and that is really the key way to get a hold of me. I am open to any questions, comments, concerns, things that people would like me to talk about. And if somebody happens to be in Texas, I know Texas is a really, really large state, but if you happen to be by DFW or willing to travel, I'm more than willing to talk to people and meet up at the local dungeons and things like that too. So always willing to have conversations and talk to like-minded folks, especially if you fall into one of those buckets of the neurodivergent, disabled, or chronically ill community. And if people do happen to be around the DFW area or within a distance that is comfortable for them, I'd love for people to come and join us at Chronically Kinky at Infliction Hall the second Wednesday of every month, where we can talk and explore more together with us.
Absolutely love that. Guys, support this amazing human. Give them a follow, give them lots of love. And then for all of you who haven't got Reign of Fire tickets, you're going to miss some epic shit. Guys, you really have to get them. We're super excited. The team's working super hard to put some stuff together for you. We are really excited to light up your lives. All these bad fire puns are coming out. I think we need a prize at the end of this convention for the worst fire pun. I think Radically Dark still holds that title, but we need people to compete against her. So we've got panels coming up. The month before Reign of Fire, we'll have some tops and bottoms panels, and you'll get to hear all these people talk again. Please support our amazing presenters, support your local community. And if you need a scholarship, get hold of us. Our scholarships launched yesterday, so if you are BIPOC or you are in need of income support scholarships, we are happy to help you. We want you to have this education. We want you to be involved, and tag us with Let It Rain Fire on all your fire picks so that we can get FetLife ablaze. From my dungeon in Cape Town, South Africa, lots of love and kitten kisses, and speak to you guys soon.